Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is Fisk University at the 21st century. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about Fisk University at the 21st century, the president of Fisk University, Dr. Carolyn Reid-Wallace. And of course, Dr. Carolyn Reid-Wallace, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haney. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
And to tell you how delighted we are to have you here, President Reid-Wallace. One reason we're delighted to have you here is because I think that in a real sense you continue a long tradition that this show has had with Fisk University. We've had the president of Fisk University as well as many other administrators and scholars from Fisk University, and we've always used Fisk University as a tremendous resource for some of the things that we do here. But before we get into our topic for the day to talk about the institution at the 21st century, Dr. Reid-Wallace, let's have you to give our audience some information about your background, your education, and some of the things dealing with your experiences that eventually led you to become the first African-American female of this great institution. Let's start there and then we'll talk about some other aspects of it.
Thank you very much, and it is an interesting story that should really begin by me telling you that in my wildest dreams, when I came to Fisk as a freshman, 16 years old, many, many years ago, I had absolutely no idea that I'd ever be sitting here talking to you in the capacity that I'm in, that is, as president of Fisk. I was born in Williamsburg, Virginia, and you may know that Williamsburg is one of those small, historic towns that is rich in history and tradition, as is Fisk. I am the middle daughter, one of 3 children, born to Nathaniel and Elizabeth Reid, both of whom are alive. My father is 87 years old. My mother is 80. They've been married for 64 years old, and they are wonderful, wonderful people. When I grew up, there was never a question that I would or would not go to college. It was always understood that I and my brother and my sister would go to college. The only question was where. I went to high school in Williamsburg, Virginia, and during those days, I went to school in the 50s and 60s, early 60s. Things were segregated, and so I went to a segregated school, but I will tell you, we always took pride in thinking that it was one of the finest schools in the United States, and it was. We had the cream of the crop in terms of our teachers, men and women. They had the highest expectations of each student, and you didn't get out of there unless you demonstrated more than a minimum proficiency. They call themselves preparing us for the world in which we lived. I attended Fisk. I came with every expectation that I would do well, and I did. I left Fisk, and that following year ended up with a master's degree from Adelphi University in New York, and then some years later got a PhD at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And I've either taught as a university professor, starting out at Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama, then to Howard University and Bowie State College, it's now a university, Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa, George Washington University in Washington, City University of New York. Or if I wasn't teaching, I was an administrator. I was a dean of faculty and a vice chancellor for academic affairs, and now president of Fisk. In between that time, I had the privilege of serving as assistant secretary of post-secondary education for the Department of Education in Washington. That was a presidentially appointed position. And I also served as a senior vice president in your business of education and programming for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And in that role, I gave money to producers to put programs on PBS and on NPR. And that was an extraordinary experience because it helped me understand that there are a lot of ways to educate. It's not simply standing in front of a classroom. It's also using the power of your business, television. I am a widow, and I am the mother of one son, and I am a proud American, glad to be alive in the 21st century and very pleased to be a member of the community of Nashville.
You know, Dr. Reid-Wallace, let's generally, I like to talk about the history of Fisk University, but I think that you represent more than anything the history of Fisk University. Let's have you to reflect on coming to Fisk University as a freshman and some of the things that happened to you and some of the individuals that impress you, and from that perspective, let's talk about that, to talk about the history of this institution.
That's a wonderful way to approach Fisk because it gives me a chance to add human beings to this institutional context and setting. When I came to Fisk, it was a very vibrant place. You had the civil rights movement going on, and sitting to my right in the humanities class was a man who ended up becoming a United States Congressman, John Lewis. John sat right next to me in humanities class. He and I were taught by one of the finest professors of English I have ever known, Robert Hayden. You may have heard of Professor Hayden. He was not only an excellent English teacher, he was a very fine poet. He wrote the famous poem Middle Passage, describing the hijira from Africa to the United States that the slaves took. The people at Fisk were caring. I would go into the business office to check on my bill, and little did I know that the lady behind the desk, who always treated me so nicely and so kindly, would end up becoming a Tennessee state senator. I'm talking about Miss Thelma Harper, a kind person. Now, Mr. Hawkins, who was a fine man, but he was grumpy, and you know, he'd scare you, and Miss Harper was always there to sort of soothe things over. Incidentally, Mr. Hawkins became one of my dearest friends. I came over time to realize that his bark was probably greater than his bite. Anna Bontemps, a great man. I did not realize how great these people were at that time. I just knew they were there, and they were very nice, and they expected good things and high things of you. I happen to have had the pleasure of having as my major professor an extraordinary woman whom she's dead now. Her name was Dr. Lillian Welch Voorhees. I owe so much to her. She believed in me and in all of her students. And when people believe in you, it helps you to believe in yourself. Fisk served as the beginning of everything that has materialized for me in terms of my interest in education, in terms of my confidence in myself, and in terms of my knowledge that other people touch your life in ways that you don't understand at the time, but it has served as a motivation to help me do the same thing now that I am on the other side of the fence.
And of course, Dr. Reid-Wallace, we're getting ready for our first commercial break, after which we'll come back and we'll give you an opportunity to continue this discussion in reference to Fisk University and the impression. Certainly, we would like to hear about the Jubilee Singers and
I want to talk about them. I want to talk about them.
And of course, we're going to give you an opportunity as soon as we come back. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Dr. Reid-Wallace